Geez, I really have to think about this. My arch-nemesis.
Welcome to another episode of Genealogy is Fun, and today I have a very special guest. One of the original genealogy YouTubers who got it started all, Mr. GeneaVlogger himself, Jarrett Ross. And both of us attended the IAJGS convention, which stands for the International Association for Jewish Genealogical Societies. And so today, I am going to be interviewing Jarrett about how he got into genealogy, about his YouTube channel, and kind of just getting a quick rundown of who he is. For anybody on this channel who has not heard of him, Jarrett has been a lifelong genealogist, and he is extremely knowledgeable on a lot of topics. He gave a fantastic presentation that I watched where he dove into the future of genealogy, including talking about a lot of the new technology that is driving the field forward. But today, we just want to talk to him about his past, the future, and what got him started on this journey. So without further ado, thank you, Mr. Ross.
Hello, everybody. I am Jarrett Ross, also known as the GeneaVlogger. I am a genealogist and a YouTuber, and I have two channels on YouTube. Well, I technically have more, but two main channels. I have my channel GeneaVlogger, then I also have my channel Professional Genealogist Reacts, where I react to all sorts of DNA videos and genealogy videos.
So Jarrett, what was it that got you hooked on genealogy?
So I got hooked on genealogy back when I was about 9 years old. I went to my cousin's bar mitzvah, and there my uncle had printed out these pages showing my Nunez Vaz ancestry going back to the 1600s. And as a little 9-year-old, that just intrigued me like crazy. And so I was all about that, like family history stuff. And so my mom at the time bought me one of the family tree softwares. She also bought a couple of ancestry discs, because this was back in the day where Ancestry would send out CDs of records. And so I would try to build trees. And throughout the years, I'd be very, interested in it on and off. But I didn't really get obsessed with genealogy until I got into college during my senior year, when I started to build out my tree and actually locate my cousins all around the world. And a big part of that was because with Genie.com being collaborative, I'd found that website, and that made it so I could connect with cousins so much easier and then share all of the work that I was doing. And that was when it just became an absolute obsession.
Now tell me about your biggest brick wall, one that you've tried to break through but still have not.
Okay, yeah, well, that's an easy one to talk about, because the biggest brick wall in my family tree that has been around since I started was my great-grandmother on my father's side, my paternal grandfather's mother. And we know very little about her. We know that she went by Fanny or Fega, or the other variants of that name. I think I've seen her listed as Frances in a record as well. We don't know what her maiden name is. There's a few possibilities. I've had relatives tell me Greenspan. I've seen records that seem to indicate something like Baruch might be the name. But even with DNA testing and, researching super in depth, and, for a long time, her husband was also a brick wall. For a long time, it was my great-grandparents that were the brick wall. And then I was able to break through on her husband's side a few years ago, but she's still been there. So we don't even know where in the Pale of Settlement she came from. We just know maybe Poland, areas of present-day Poland, maybe areas of present-day Ukraine or Russia, or maybe even something up in Lithuania or Latvia. So that's been my biggest brick wall that I have not cracked since I started this, which I guess the time that I got obsessed with it would have been about 2009. So what is that, 15 years? This has been a major brick wall for my tree.
In a similar regard, tell me about a brick wall that you thought you'd never break through, but finally did?
Okay, so actually, I'll talk about one branch that was recently broken through. Um, Basically, on my father's side, that has been the most brick walls that I have. And on my father's mother's line, I knew her parents' names, but I really didn't know much beyond that. We had some ideas, and I did make a breakthrough years ago on my grandmother's mother's line, but my grandmother's father, which is where the Ross name comes from, originally Rosenberg, I had his parents' names, but it was a lot of mixture of names. So the father, we found him as Bernard, Benjamin, which not too different, but then also on the gravestones for his children, he was listed as Reuben Bear. So a little bit of a connection there. But his wife, we had her as Annie, Jenny, Beatrice. I know there was another one I saw too, but both of them were major brick walls. The surname for the family, Rosenberg. So Rosenberg, that could be almost anywhere. We had hints, maybe Germany, maybe Poland, but not really quite sure. And recently, through the help of a cousin of mine on a whole different branch of my family, about a fourth cousin, his name is Evan Wolfson. He had been researching this family that was living in the Suwałk region. And in researching it, he actually recognized a lot of my family members as DNA matches to this family. So he reached out to me and we started to look into things, and it was discovered that the Rosenberg name was originally Drakowski, or at least another variation was Drakowski. And finding that information, that allowed us to then expand the family tree and then find other DNA matches to help confirm that he was Drakowski, as well as we found, I hope I get this right because I always forget the record collection, but I believe it's the Rosenbaum passenger records of people who were paying to help people come over. And in that record, it shows this Yankel Drakowski coming over to the home of Miss Jetty Rosenberg at somewhere South Street in Philadelphia, which works perfectly because we're in Philly now. And when I found that, that was what helped it tie everything together. And then actually just last night, Evan Wolfson, who helped discover all of this, consulted the book from Biter. Why can't I think of his first name? I think it's Alexander Biter. But he has a book about surnames and what the connections may be. And in looking at that, the Drakowski name, or names that are similar to dropped, it is related to wires. And then looking at the records further for Suwałki, we found that multiple family members were wire cutters. So that likely explains the multiple names in that area. They would often have multiple surnames because they might have an occupational-based surname. They may have a different surname that they chose. Sometimes it might be a patronymic surname. So our thought is that Rosenberg was likely the surname that they had as a actual surname, and the Drakowski surname was much more of an occupational surname. So we are starting to see the records show both of those names together in the Suwałki region, and it's a lot of work still going into it, but that's actually been one of the most recent brick walls that I solved. It's interesting how surnames were very fluid back then, but it also makes sense when you think about the fact that a lot of them had been alive when the surnames were chosen, when, early 1800s, when a lot of the people in the Pale of Settlement started to adopt surnames. So,
when did you start your YouTube channel?
Okay, that's a good question. I actually get asked that a lot less than I would expect. I started my YouTube channel because I had made the decision that I wanted to become a genealogist, and I had always wanted to do a YouTube channel. Over the years, I had tried doing different YouTube channels, I'd actually been on YouTube really early on. I think 2005, 2006, like first year YouTube was around. I had an account. Granted, back then, the way I viewed YouTube wasn't a place to have a platform and spread it out to people. I saw it more as like a place to just post videos, like a lot of the websites back then where you could post all of your photos. Because back then on the internet, there weren't many places to be able to upload large files. But over the years, I would try to get into YouTube, and so when I decided that I was going to become a professional genealogist, I was driving back home, and I remember the exact spot that it popped into my head, because I drive that spot all the time, and I think about it almost every time I drive by it. I was taking a right onto this street, Westlake Road in Cary, North Carolina, and as soon as I was doing that, I realized Genealogy YouTube channel. So I went home and I looked up what was on YouTube at the time. This was summer 2017, and there was stuff on genealogy on YouTube. But in my opinion, it was a lot of what we already see in the genealogy community, which is very informative, but very dry, and in my opinion, very boring. And the kind of stuff that is why a lot of youth just don't really get into genealogy, because the content to learn about it is really dry and boring. And there was stuff on there that wasn't as dry. Family History Fanatics had just started, I think, maybe a few months or a year before I had done that search, so they had started to build things up. But my thought was, well, I could use YouTube, one, as a platform to show my work so people that might want to hire me can see that I knew what I was doing and what I could possibly do for them and my expertise. And second, I thought, well, I've always wanted to do YouTube, and while I'm not going to expect this to be something that will possibly become a career or even make me money at all, I figured, well, I'll do it because it has that potential as well. So it works as free advertising and marketing for me, a free tool to brag about my work, because that's one thing a lot of genealogists want to do, is they want to talk about what they do, and half the time when we do, people's eyes are glazing over. But really just that idea of, okay, too, I can develop this in a way where if it does become potential for an actual career or something like that, that I could actually run with it. So I've lucked out in that doing it in that way of trying to set it up like that has worked out quite well, because now I am a full-time YouTuber.
Let's talk about the first time you got paid for researching someone's family.
So the first time someone actually hired me to research my tree was before I decided to become a professional genealogist. I come from a Sephardic family. My mother was born with the last name Nunes Vaz, a very Western Sephardic family name, and I had been focusing on that family tree more than anything. That story I told about going to my cousin's bar mitzvah, the Nunes Vaz line was that line that had been printed out showing all the way back to the 1600s in Livorno, Italy. And so with the Nunes Vaz family, that has really been a major focus of mine, and a lot of my cousins wanted to get Portuguese citizenship and Spanish citizenship because we knew we had that Sephardic connection. And in the 2010s, I can't remember the exact year, I want to say 2013 or 2015, Spain and Portugal enacted laws that allowed fast-track citizenship for those who were proven descendants of Sephardim. So the first actual time I ever got paid was a cousin of mine basically saying, I want you to write out a really nice document with citations for all of the records and an appendix with records and all of that, and we'll pay you for the work. You tell us how much you want to charge, which actually when I told them how much I wanted to charge, they said, don't charge us that little, charge us more. So I did, and that was the kind of first foray into report writing, which in my opinion is the hardest part about being a professional genealogist. So if you want to be a professional genealogist, learn how to write reports. One of the biggest things. But I did that, and that was, I guess, a couple of years, I guess it was just a year or two before I decided to go fully professional. But at the time, everyone told me to do professional, but I was like, I've got other stuff going on. I wanted to be a musician. I was in bands at the time, touring and all of that. And I don't know if this is going to answer a question you may have coming up at some point, But I ended up actually deciding to become a professional genealogist because I had tours set up with one of the bands that I was in, and our drummer and guitarist got into a fight on stage at a show. The band broke up. We had to cancel the tour, and it just so happened that week that we were going to be on tour was the week that the NGS conference, the National Genealogical Society conference, was in Raleigh in my hometown. I went in and talked to one of the guys at Ancestry who I said, I've always thought about doing professional genealogy, but I don't want to go back to school. I want to get certified. I don't want to do all that. And, I just enjoy it kind of as a hobby sort of thing. And he was like, well, you don't actually have to get a certification. You don't have to go back to school. If you have the experience and the know-how, you can just do it. And so I said, well, actually, I had done these reports for these cousins of mine to get their Portuguese citizenship, and they had been successful in doing that, which I should mention, these cousins of mine include cousins in America and outside of America, including some cousins in Australia and New Zealand who I helped get the citizenship. So I showed these records to the gentleman at Ancestry, or not the records, the reports, and he was like, oh my God, this is exactly what we're looking for genealogists. You look like you know what you're doing. You look like you know a lot of the ways to do exhaustive research. And this report looks really nice. So I started to talk to Ancestry about possibly working for them. Things did not work out to work for them. But I decided if they were willing to really want me to work for them, and they were really excited about it too, with the amount that they were charging, I could charge way less and still be quite happy with the pay. So I decided to give it a shot. And that was when I decided to take this step towards actually becoming a professional.
This is a little bit of an odd question, but do you have an arch-nemesis?
Oh, geez, I really have to think about this. My arch-nemesis. That's that's a tough question, because I feel like I'm one of those people that gets along with way more people in the genealogy community than most other genealogists, because I find there are a lot of genealogists where they truly do have an arch nemesis, and I already can think of like a dozen people that are arch nemesis with each other, and I'm friends with both of them. Yeah, I'm trying to think of who might be my arch nemesis. Because honestly, if I did have any arch nemesises, or arch nemesi, I guess it would. Yeah, I mean, it'd be various users, I guess, that I've run into in the Genie tree, in the collaborative tree, who are not the most collaborative of people. I don't know if I should name anybody, especially because some of these people are people that ended up getting kicked off of Genie because they just were not good with working with people and caused a lot of issues.
You don't have to name any names, but
okay,
you can describe them if you want.
Okay, well, I guess one that sticks out to me, because it's one of the few times I actually got into an argument online, and luckily I had everybody that read it was like, oh yeah, this guy's crazy. For a while there was a genealogist who was a curator on Genie who worked a lot in the Sephardic trees, but his work was not good. It was a lot of assumptions, a lot of myths, a lot of misinterpretations of things. And at one point, he edited a profile for my 16th great-grandfather, Don Abraham Sr. Coronel, a very famous figure in the Sephardic world, because he is the person who introduced King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, much to the dismay of his descendants. And he also, in 1492, decided to convert to Catholicism because of the Inquisition, and because he was such a major figure in the Jewish community. It was looked down upon greatly, but at the time he was in his 90s and a lot of issues, and so it kind of makes sense, a lot easier for him to convert than try to move elsewhere. But his profile was edited by this guy, and all of a sudden he had parents and grandparents and all these other ancestors when we had a few inklings of who the parents might be, and it was not at all what he had. So I questioned the sources, and basically his response was, well, I shouldn't have to give these, and, you should trust my work, and, who are you to question me? And my response was, well, I'm a descendant, and even if I wasn't, This is Genealogy on a collaborative website, and that's the point of collaboration, is to question and expand and work together. And I'm not doing this to fight you. I'm especially interested because if what you have is correct, that's awesome. But he didn't provide any actual examples or research or records or anything to prove it, and he kept claiming that certain things would have it. But luckily, because of my connections in the Sephardic world, I was able to connect with other Sephardim and send them what he was telling me. And a few of them had some of these things that he was referencing, and they did not say what he said they said. Eventually, he was kicked off of Genie. He was kicked out of being a curator. We're still cleaning up a lot of the mess that he left on Genie because he did a lot of it. And one of the funny things was that I'm also a Wikipedian. For years, I was a hardcore Wikipedia user, got into the arbitration stuff and everything like that. And he, on his Genie profile, bragged about being on Wikipedia as well. So I went on Wikipedia to look at his profile and then saw that he was doing the exact same things in Wikipedia and had been banned from Wikipedia before he'd been banned from Genie. And when I was on Wikipedia, what I found really funny was his argument with a lot of the people that were saying, where are the citations? You've got to do this properly, was, well, you're not Jewish, so you don't know. So this guy is notorious, and I bring his name up every once in a while to some of my other Sephardi friends because it's kind of like just a joke of like, oh yeah, these trees are basically that guy type tree, So I'm not gonna name him. I doubt if I named him he'd even hear this, but yeah, better not, because like I said, I'm not the most abrasive as many genealogists are. I can be sometimes.
What is on the pipeline for you and your pursuits in the field of genealogy?
Well, at this point, the future plan is a huge focus on YouTube. I've been working like crazy for the past year to develop a lot of videos that'll be coming out. So even since I left my job for the past year, I haven't had a ton of videos coming out. And hopefully that will change greatly soon. I've been working on a lot of stuff. Actually just was in Phoenix recently to meet up with Max Miller from Tasting History with Max Miller. And I presented him and his family all of this research that I did for them, and those will be coming out as episodes on YouTube. But I've also been working a lot on doing public speaking and creating presentations. And so that's one of the things I'm hoping to start doing a lot more, is to start going around and speaking in person, as well as speaking to a lot of different organizations. So in the past year, I've developed 2 new talks, which have been the big talks that a lot of people are wanting me to give, and one which I just gave at the conference called The Future of Genealogy, where I talk about what I think is going to happen with the future of genealogy, and most especially in terms of AI and DNA. And then the other talk that I have been giving is called Exploring Investigative Genetic Genealogy, which goes into just an overview of the investigative genetic genealogy field based on my about 5 years of experience in that field. The other thing I have going on right now is that I have some book ideas in the back of my mind. I've started to work on those, and we'll see when they come out. Obviously, I'd love to have them come out earlier. But there's probably going to be a lot of work to it, and the focus right now is really YouTube, but there may be a book coming down the line at some point.
Is there anything else you're trying to tell aspiring researchers who are trying to up their game?
My advice to researchers who are trying to up their genealogy game actually goes really well with how Yona and I got to set this up, and that is going to conferences. So a lot of folks will do their genealogy and they'll learn all about stuff online, and they feel sometimes maybe it's not the best to go to a conference. It is a lot of money. It does take some time. But when you go to a conference, it absolutely expands your genealogy world. For one, the networking, you get to meet all of these genealogists who are often top of the field in their focus of study. You get to see what's the newest things happening. You get to talk to the people that are developing the newest things. And you really get to know the fellow genealogists as well. Just through online and collaboration work, it's always fun to be able to do that. But when you actually get to meet the people and talk to them and get to know their personalities and hang out and see that you're not the only crazy person staying up till 3 a.m. going through a catalog of records, that there's a ton of others doing the same thing. So that's my biggest suggestion. And nowadays, there's actually fewer genealogy conferences than when I first decided to become a professional. When I first became a professional, there was the FGS conference, the NGS conference, Roots Tech conference, IAJGS conference, and then other conferences as well. Since then, FGS and NGS merged together. Then they decided that they're only going to be doing virtual conferences, which, as wonderful as virtual conferences are, it cuts out the in-person aspect, which is what I think is the biggest benefit of all to a genealogy conference. Roots Tech is still around, quite amazing. IAJGS, which is what Yona and I attended this week, amazing. I'm a little biased with IAJGS because I am on the board of directors. But then there are some other genealogy conferences and symposiums and things that have been popping up. And one other place to also consider too are the genealogy institutes, which some people say are basically genealogy camp. And one of the ones that I've attended, the Genealogical Research Institute of Pittsburgh, or what they call GRIP, that one is one that they have it at, I'm probably going to get the school wrong. I think it's New Rochelle in Pittsburgh, but I might be wrong on that. But there's a small college in Pittsburgh that they hold this at. A lot of the attendants will actually stay in the dorm rooms on campus, and for a full week, I think it's a total of 40 hours actually, you do classes all day, and often with the number one genealogist in that focus. So when I've gone to GRIP, the first GRIP course I attended was taught by Blaine Bettinger and C.C. Moore, and that was all about advanced genetic genealogy. So that's another great way where, like a conference, you get to meet a lot of the genealogists. You also, the benefit with that is with GRIP, your classmates are often the genealogists that will in a few years be the big names, and a lot of the people that I was in the class with that were just like me at the time, getting started and trying to build up our names. A lot of them now are very big names in the community. So that's really the biggest thing. I guess beyond just conferences or the institutes are in-person events for genealogy. But the institutes and the conferences are definitely top tier of that.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Jarrett. Those were some incredible answers. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Yona.